just to let you know when it started now.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So I declare this meeting of the City Council open. So this meeting is being conducted remotely in accordance with the Local Government and Elections Wales Act and the remote meetings protocol agreed by Cabinet, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public, and can I request that you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you're not speaking in order to ensure there's no necessary background noise and to help with the audio and visual quality of the broadcast. The Council's standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meetings in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can I also remind members to ensure their chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute both your microphone and to switch your camera on. For the benefit of everyone watching on the live stream, when I invite members to cast their votes on any particular item, they will do so electronically using the voting facility in the chat function. The votes will be automatically counted and are recorded on the system, but individual votes are not identified on the screen, and the chat room poll is not available on the live stream for public viewing. However, I will announce the number of votes cast for or against and any abstentions before I declare the result. As well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the Council website for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. So, item 1, are there any apologies? We've received apologies from Richard White.
No other apologies, thank you.
No other apologies. Thank you, Anne. So, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest at this stage? No. So, if any declarations of interest arise during the course of the meeting, then members should draw this to my attention by using the raised hand facility or by posting a message in the chat box. I think that both the leader and Councillor Evans have got their cameras on still. If they could look at that, please. So as we know, we received nothing for declaration of interest. So item 2, the minutes. The minutes from the 28th of September are before us. Are there any points of accuracy? So I move the minutes as a true record. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Guy. So would all those in favour please indicate by clicking on the voting application in the chat box. I'll give all members a short time to cast their vote. Any sign of that? I can't see the chat box yet. Have other members found it?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, the councillors are using the raised hand facility, Mr. Mayor, but I think from that you can take it that they're all in agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. So the approval of those minutes is duly carried. So the next item is item 3, which is appointments. Councillor Harvey will move the appointments in the report and any additions, and Councillor Fowler will second them. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, please note the report with the following amendments. Mr. Alan Screen, Local Authority Governor for Tredegar Park Primary. Rob Green to be an LA Governor for Marpus Church and Wales Primary. And please could I request 6 months dispensation for Councillor Holyoke on the grounds of continuing ill health in accordance with Section 85 of the Local Government Act 1972. And could I also congratulate Mr. Paul Jones on his recent appointment as the new Director for Environment and Sustainability, and Miss Mary Ryan on her appointment as Head of Adult Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Fairweather, do you second that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm happy to second it. However, I wasn't consulted on the dispensation for Councillor Holyoke, and it would have been nice to have known about it, but I will support it, and the Conservative group will as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fowler. Perhaps next time we can ensure that that does happen.
Yeah, an email was sent, Mr Mayor, but clearly it hasn't reached the other end.
Thank you. And to remind members now, we're just voting on those two items, not voting on the appointments of the two staff appointments that Councillor Harvey has talked about. So it's just those first couple of items. So all members now, please vote on that. I still don't have anything here, Mr. Price. The voting box is not coming up.
None of us have, Mr Mayor.
No, it's not coming through, Mr Mayor. But again, the members are using the raised hand facility. So again, from that, I can see that everyone is in favour of the motion. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. So if the chat box is restored to life, the poll will use that. Otherwise, I'll invite members to just use the raised hand facility to vote on any items we might have. So next we've got police issues. So I'm pleased to welcome Chief Superintendent Tom Harding to the meeting. So may I remind members that if they wish to put any questions to Chief Superintendent Harding after his presentation, then please use the raised hand facility in the chat box. I invite you to speak in the order indicated. We'll see now whether the chat box materialises as well. So Chief Superintendent Harding, the floor is yours.
Good evening, all. You're going to have a double act from Mike and myself this evening. So for those of you that I haven't met, it's nice to be able to speak to you this evening. I'll let Mike run us through some bits and we'll come together and then obviously answer any questions that people have.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, everybody. You will remember the last time I briefed this meeting was the 28th of September. And I talked about the demand that policing was facing along with our partners. And you'll probably recall me talking about the increase in volume of 999 demand, pressures on our health service that we were supporting. I talked about Halloween and bonfire being particularly busy periods. And then added into that, I talked about COP26 and losing 108 police officers on mutual aid to Glasgow. I'm pleased to come back and report that we've got through that really busy period through some careful planning. I think we've been able to maintain a decent level of service. We now focus our attention to a busy Christmas and New Year period, and our focus will be on our nighttime economy in the city, anticipated increases of burglary, drink drive, domestic violence and retail crime. So that's the focus of our attention in the next few weeks. I've got 3 updates that I'd like to give you this evening. The first one is around our Safer Streets, our Home Office funding that we've been successful in securing, and I'm going to hand over to Tom at that moment. Tom's going to brief you on that work and probably going to brief you also on the work that he's been doing with our partners, with our strategic coordinating group, looking at innovative ways to reduce the demand on health and partners. I'm then going to come back in and give you some highlights in terms of performance, themes that we've seen in terms of crime rates. I'll give you some updates then from our 3 neighboured inspectors in Newport City Centre, Newport East and Newport West. And then we'll open up for questions as we always do, and Tom and I will do our best to answer those questions that you may have. So at this stage, I'll hand over to Tom. Tom can brief you on some of the Safer Streets funding and his work with partners on the strategic coordinating group. Tom.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. So as you probably all are aware, in terms of the Safer Streets Home Office funded scheme that forces and partners can apply for, and they've run a number of rounds of that funding. Since I've been here, I'm really pleased that we've applied for 5 pots of funding for Gwent. We've achieved 4 out of those 5 and punched well above our weight in terms of the size of the area and the funding that we've received. And I'm really pleased that 2 out of those 4 are for Newport. So there are 2 elements. The first element is in relation to acquisitive crime, so that's theft, robbery, burglary, and the safety of areas, and that initial funding was awarded for PIL. That's approximately £400,000, and really pleased that we're sort of working really closely with everyone in the local authority and other partners, and have done in the bid process. And I thought we put together a first-class bid, which was thankfully recognised, and we've secured the money. I appreciate it's caused some confusion with some sections of communities as to why certain areas have got funding and others haven't. The Home Office set quite strict criteria in terms of the level of crime required in relation to those certain areas for us to be eligible to actually bid. So there were only certain areas that we could bid for. In terms of PIL, we'll be running a number of consultation events over the next few weeks, with partners invited to be meeting with members of the community and to start the rollout of some of those initiatives. So we've got funding for CCTV, street lighting, property marking, so smart water. Every house will be offered a property marking kit. We'll be putting signage up then, and there are other interventions and crime prevention products that we'll be offering the local community. So I'm having rolled this out elsewhere in my previous job. We saw huge successes. It was academically evaluated. We saw acquisitive crime drop by between 30 and 50%, and that happened across a large number of different areas. We trialled it urban and rural, different levels of deprivation, and worked across all of those. So I'm really confident that those communities are going to see a real benefit from that. For those of you who represent other parts of Newport, I'm also pleased that we're building this into our day-to-day work under a We Don't Buy Crime project, which I lead. So hopefully over the next few weeks and months, your communities will start to see this work across the board. We already now do it for any victim of a burglary offence. They get a property marking kit and a visit and advice. So we're really trying to up our game around that and provide that level of support. The next tranche of the funding was linked to violence against women and girls and safety in our communities. So that's focused on the city centre in the main and surrounding areas, and again CCTV, street lighting, some initiatives in terms of street wardens, and some further work that we're looking to do in terms of visibility in and around those communities. We did some survey work with the help of the local authority. It was fascinating in terms of when people do and don't feel safe. Clearly nighttime, certain locations, intimidation potentially from larger groups or others. And a big part of that campaign will be a campaign relating to a comms approach, a joint comms approach, hopefully between us all who work and live in Newport, to set what we accept in terms of our tolerance levels. So to say, actually, we don't tolerate inappropriate behaviour. We will positively take action to deal with it. We want everyone to feel safe going about their business here. So we're literally working that up as we speak. The funding for Safer Streets needs to be spent by the end of March, so the time frame is tight, but people are doing a lot of work, very quick time, to make sure that we spend all of that £700,000. So the second tranche of funding there was about 300,000. The good thing with that is it gives us a basis upon which to continue to build. This isn't put funding in place, job done, thank you very much. It's how do we start this, and then how do we roll it out further afield. So we'll be looking at other funding streams. How can we improve this? So, you know, the whole of Newport is adopting this approach in terms of people feeling safe, etc. So a positive piece of work. Keen to come back and report to you next time to let you know how we're getting on in terms of that spending. Then if I move on to the SCG, so the Strategic Coordination Group. So I've been asked to chair that on behalf of Gwent in totality, and we're looking at as you're probably all aware, a strategic coordination group and a tactical coordination group are utilised within the civil contingencies world, often around flooding or other environmental issues. We've chosen to stand it up in Gwent around our health and care sector because of the significant issues that we are seeing in terms of delays for ambulance, waiting outside A&E, the lack of beds in our hospitals, the inability to potentially discharge some patients back into the community. We've been running that now for approximately 10 weeks. And there are a number of subgroups under that that are looking at all of these various different issues, trying to prioritise some key actions that we can take to ensure that we make Gwent and Newport as safe as possible. We've started to get some traction and see some benefits, and if you speak to WAST, So the ambulance service, they will say that Gwent is in the best position of any area in Wales at present. The issue we've got is that the rest of Wales are starting to take these issues into consideration and look at how they resolve them, because unfortunately our ambulance is a regional basis. So if we alleviate some issues and concerns here, those ambulances may well be going elsewhere. So I'm privy to Welsh Government meetings that we're all having from an all Wales perspective, and there's a lot of time and focus going on, but we're still in a very critical situation, and I wouldn't want to try and disguise that fact. There are significant delays in terms of ambulance times. It's not acceptable, and we're all keen as partners to push as far as we can to try and resolve that. But you'll probably all be aware of some cases where people have waited too long. But just to reassure that we're on it, I've got another meeting tomorrow. I've just come off a meeting with all of the adult services leads from across Gwent, and we're looking at how we can seek to improve that further. But thanks, Mike. I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just propose now just to give you some data in terms of how we're performing across the city. And then I'm going to give you some updates from the 3 sectional inspectors, and then we'll hand over to members for questions. So in terms of our overall performance, we know that overall crime reduction is about 3.5% in the 12 months to October 2021. So we reduced crime by 3.5% compared to the previous 12 months to October 2020. And to put that into context, that means 816 fewer offences in the last 12 months in comparison with the previous 12 months. So we've seen decreases or reductions in 12 of the 18 Home Office crime categories. I wanted to draw your attention to some of our performance in relation to residential burglary. In Q2 of this year, which is July to September, we saw a significant crime reduction when compared with the same quarter for 2019-2020 BC before COVID. That was a reduction of 24%. Q2 now with Q2 2019-2020, and a reduction of 10.5% based on Q2 last year. So those reductions are bigger than the national average, which I think is positive. We know that in October just gone, we saw more burglaries than average in the west of the city. So our plan is focusing on Pale, Mice, Glass in terms of residential burglary. Often people ask me how much of that residential burglary we solve. And I can tell you that when we look at the 43 forces across England and Wales, we ranked between 10 and 11 out of 43 forces. So yes, room for improvement, but certainly in the top half of the best performing forces in England and Wales. I often get asked at this forum around our performance around 999 calls and 101 service. In October, we received about 7,500 999 calls. That's about 240 a day. If I was here this time last year speaking to you, that number would have been about 180. So a significant increase in our calls for service on the 999s. But I'm really pleased to say that over 90% of those calls are answered within 10 seconds. I know there are some occasions when we don't reach that service, and Councillor Harvey has sent me an email only this week to raise a concern about a 999 call, which I'll be taking up with our force control room. But we're doing our best to get through those 999 calls as quickly as we can. The 101 service, again, big increases throughout the month of October. We've seen about 400 a day. Average speed of answer for the 101s is about 7 minutes and 7 seconds. And we know that the peak time for that 101 service throughout the month of October was between 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock, where we've received about 900 calls. So I think my message to the communities of Newport is to think perhaps that if they are going to call us and it's not urgent, to consider the time of day they call us and think maybe about other ways they can contact the police online, Facebook, and so on. My final update, Mr. Mayor and members, are written updates that I've received from our inspectors in each of our sections. I will start with the update from the City Centre from Inspector Jodie Davis. She's informed me that the priorities for her team are youths causing nuisance behaviour in Friars Walk and the Kingsway, violence associated with the nighttime economy, begging and shoplifting. And I'm going to read out some of her updates. So I'll be as quickly as I can because I know you want to ask questions. Operation Ashton is an operation that she's established to deal with the youth annoyance. It's a new and innovative restorative justice approach, working with partners. Over 40 youths have been identified who will sit before a multi-agency panel here at Newport Central. The panel will consist of police, youth offending service and members of the business community. It will consist of a 4-week course that will be run by the police, and part of that restorative justice will be the 4-week course. These youths potentially working with some of our businesses in the community, and that is something that our business community have really pushed us for, to get their voice heard in the decision-making process in terms of what happens to some of these youths. Inspector Davis has updated me on a new multi-agency group that's been established to look at some of the issues in the city centre, some of the nighttime economy issues. She's informed me that on the run-up to Christmas there will be an increase in visibility of her officers, particularly around the shoplifting offences that we will see in the coming months. I've had to heavily redact a lot of what she's said to me, but she's updated me on a number of prolific offenders who've been dealt with for shoplifting offences on the city centre, some of which have received custodial sentences, so will be behind bars until after Christmas, many of which have been handed criminal behaviour orders. So some real positive updates there. Jodie has got a process in place where she meets with our business communities on the last Thursday of every month. I'll quickly move into the update from Newport East from Inspector Martin Corley. He's updated me of a joint warrant with RSPCA where they have seized 25 dogs, and these subjects are due in court in December for charges of animal cruelty. He's updated me, and I think we discussed it at the last meeting, of the antisocial behaviour issues in Allway and Ringland, and some really good partnership work to get the multi-use games area in Ringland reopened for our youths in Allway and Ringland. He's updated me in the Victoria ward, 3 properties that have been closed, one in Livingston Place, one in Morris Street, one on Duckpool Road as a result of drug dealing. And of course, he's updated me on the ongoing car cruising problem in Spitty on a Sunday evening. Those plans will continue. And I'll finish off, Mr. Mayor, with an update from Newport West, starting in Pill, 3 warrants executed under the Misuse of Drugs Act. In terms of the Psbo in Pill, over 200 tickets and warnings issued, over 10 community protection warnings created, 2 warrants executed for stolen property, 2 houses closed in Dolphin Court and Herbert Walk. Moving quickly on to Mice Glass and the Gay, Operation Raptor ongoing in terms of off-road bikes, a closure notice on a property in Gay Vale relating to drug misuse. In Marshfield, 2 joint enforcement operations with trading standards, Newport City Council, NRW and the DVLA. The issues in the Wentloog levels, we are heavily involved in those, and I would personally like to extend my thanks to the Chief Executive for her leadership in establishing a leadership meeting with the Chief Executive of Cardiff City Council recently to look at the cross-border issues with the Wentloog Community Council and the Peterstone residents against inappropriate development. So my personal thanks to her. Dufferin and Tredegar, 3 warrants executed under the Misuse of Drugs Act in the last 2 months. Bettus, another house closed down in Medway Road, 2 drugs warrants executed. Malpas, a drugs warrant executed, positive outcome. And Rogerstone, just to finish off, the issue with off-road bikes continues there. And I think, Mr. Mayor, I will leave it there. I know we're pushed for time, and I know that we'll always have questions from members.
Yeah, thank you. I did see that piece from you, Tom. If you'd like to speak about where we are with the terror threat.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Of course, we started off with the tragic murder of Sir David Amos. That afternoon, made contact with all of our MPs, MSs, and made contact with the chief exec, because what I did want to highlight was appreciate that you're all elected members, that you serve our community, and highlighted that if any of you had any concerns, security issues or concerns, then to flag them through the chief exec, and we're of course here to help and support you. I just wanted to clarify as well, and we made the inquiries nationally and it was fed back to us that there is no information or intelligence to suggest any threat to local councillors. Obviously, we are concerned around those individuals that we all know potentially can become fixated or cause issues. So please do let us know if you have individuals that cause you concern. And then secondly, just to highlight, we're aware, as I'm sure you all are, that the national terror threat has increased. We've been linking in nationally with that. We have no specific intelligence for anywhere across Gwent or in Newport, but we are stepping up our response in terms of crowded places, arranged events, Christmas lights switched on, etc. And we're putting additional visibility into there. We also have the ability with our armed officers that they are armed and in locations should we need them, and they have what's called a standing authority, so that they are armed and ready to deal with any situation should they be required to do so. So please do contact us if you have any individual concerns. I appreciate they'll be personal in nature, but also be reassured that there are no increased intelligence or threats from a terror perspective across Newport. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I too would encourage members who have concerns about safety to contact the police. But I know that members are also very aware they need to be visible to the people that vote for them. So that's one of the issues that we get with it. Right, thank you. Before we proceed to questions, I would like the leader, would you wish to say a few words before we commence?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mike and Tom, for coming along to present to us this evening. I was delighted to hear you mention the Safer Streets funding that we've achieved here, because that's a great example of partnership working. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to publicly congratulate two of our partnership team officers, Caoimhe Cantwell and Luke George, for being awarded a Police and Crime Commissioner's Award for partnership working in relation to that. It's really a tremendous effort, and it goes to show what we can achieve working together. So that is really positive, and I welcome that. Just a few concerns that I'd like to raise, and a few comments. So in relation to the city centre, just generally, we're experiencing an increase in what I describe as hate crime in relation to fly posting offensive materials throughout the city centre. And I'm really just seeking an assurance that this matter will be dealt with by the police, because I was contacted by a number of people who are part of the transgender community, who were experiencing extreme distress at some of the materials that are being posted across the city centre. And quite frankly, I was appalled that in the 21st century people feel that it's acceptable to do this. I really was. And whilst I'm pleased to say that our officers were able to act on that very rapidly and remove the offending items, they are still appearing across the city, and I would appeal to the police to help us address this, because people have the right to live without fear. So I really wanted to raise that very strongly here today. Going back to our previous meeting, and I did raise the issues of some challenges within my own ward, so it was very pleasing to note that following that meeting, the police patrols were increased in Malpas, particularly around the St David's Hospice, where there was quite a bit of antisocial behaviour. I'm delighted to read the announcement that a moped had been impounded, given all the challenges that we've had in the area and the concerns that residents have raised around the antisocial behaviour in relation to that. I suppose I've just got two questions really to follow on from that. And my one is the assurances that we can give at the local level to residents in terms of reporting antisocial behaviour, because none of us can act on it if our residents don't report it appropriately, and I'd be really keen to explore what further assurances we can give residents on that, because we have recently had a number of residents approach us about challenging behaviour of some people within our community, but they're reluctant to report, and we really do need to do some further work around that. It would be helpful also, I think, if you were able to clarify the inspector and the relationship with the inspector. Am I correct in my understanding that monthly meetings are offered to elected members on a east-west central basis with inspectors? Do they meet regularly in that way? That would be helpful for clarification on that. And I'd like to pick up the point on security and the terrorist threat, because I received a great deal of support from Gwent Police when I was in a very distressing position in terms of some harassment by a member of the public. And so actually I was deeply disappointed that when this issue emerged, there seems to be some disparity between the level of contact between police forces across Wales and the leaders of local authorities. I was disappointed to hear that in some authorities leaders had been contacted directly, because I felt, certainly as a leader, given my previous experience, that my safety would have been taken more seriously. So I was disappointed with that, but I welcome the reassurance that you give all members this evening, so thank you.
Yeah, just Councillor Anwami, your camera's on. I wonder, could you switch it off, please? Thank you. So are there any points you wish to answer it of what the leaders just said before we move on to members' questions?
So I'll start, Mike, and then jump in. So in terms of the terror threat and your safety, I apologise if you felt that wasn't taken seriously, but like I said, I emailed the chief exec within, I think, 3 hours of the incident taking place to offer my support to any councillor, whatever their position, and that I was here to support them should they have any issues whatsoever. Very happy to copy you indirectly. I appreciate feedback from people. If you would all like that sort of contact, happy to do that, or through the chief exec, through the leader, etc., or through the leaders of the various parties. So perhaps if people would like to feed back to me how they would like that contact, then very happy to facilitate that. And our commitment is very much there. If any of you feel that you have any unwanted attention, you feel unsafe, insecure in any way, shape or form, then you are very well protected by us, and we will do everything we can to support you. So I was pleased to hear about the previous experience and support you'd had. In relation to hate crime, thanks for flagging that. Just to reassure everyone that hate crime, every single hate crime reported to us is discussed every morning at our 8:30 meeting, which is all of our senior officers in Newport and all the various teams. We scrutinise every incident, ensure it's had an appropriate response, an appropriately trained officer has dealt with it, and absolutely, please do encourage anyone to report any hate-related fly posting, etc., and we will deal with it in that day, and we'll make sure that it gets the appropriate time and resource that it should do. So really disappointed to hear that we've got that and that people feel that that's acceptable, but you've got our commitment around that. Mike, in terms of the meetings with inspectors?
Yeah, and just to add on the hate crime transgender issue, we've done a lot to educate our own team as well. We've got a new independent advisory group member who's transgender that's doing a lot of work with our officers to educate them. So really sorry to hear about those leaflets. I will speak to the local inspector and make sure that the response is as it should be. In terms of inspector meetings, it is mine and Tom's expectation that those inspectors have a good working relationship with their elected members. We're going through a transition period in Newport West at the moment, Leader. There'll be a new inspector that's appointed to Newport West by the end of this week. There's been a gap for the last 3 to 4 weeks. So I'm sorry if you've experienced a gap in service more recently, but we will reinforce to our inspectors that we expect them to have a process in place where they are formally meeting with you regularly, like Tom and I do with the members of Parliament and Senate members. So we will push for that. I've also noted down the antisocial behaviour concern that you raise, and I'll make sure that we're as responsive as we can be in terms of those issues, and our communities feel confident to report it.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to members' questions. Now, I don't, so Mr. Price, are you giving me the order, because I can't see that on my screen?
Councillor Harvey was the first to indicate on the list, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so if you could work your way through it as we proceed through the 30 minutes. Councillor Harvey, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, both. Thanks for making reference to my email, Mike, because given the issues we've had in Allway, for a lone female to dial 999 at midnight and have no response whatsoever until 5 o'clock in the morning, once it gets light, will come out. It's really not acceptable. And I know you agree that it's not acceptable. I'm not blaming you. When you dial 999, you could be anywhere in the country. We all know that. But that lady was in a terrible state. She's also a victim of domestic abuse. And what she suffered Sunday evening was an absolute disgrace. It took members of the fishing club to come to her aid at 3 in the morning. It's not right. You know how bad it is on this estate at the moment. We've had a murder, we've had antisocial behaviour on another level. I'm not saying anybody would have killed her. I'm not. But when she phones for distress, it should be answered. In addition to that, we're also having properties targeted with pegs, getting ready to be burgled, basically. They're coming as if they're walking their dog, dropping a peg on a gate or on the side of a bin. And then that's for the next lot that's coming around behind them. So they're aware that's the property we're going to try and break into.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey, and thank you for making me aware of that 999 call earlier this week. It's certainly something that Tom and I will raise with the head of our control room. I'm sorry that we didn't get the service right on that occasion, and thank you for providing us that piece of intelligence around the burglaries. I will feed that back into Inspector Corley to make sure I respond into that. I'm very grateful to you.
Thanks, both.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Mr. Price, the next person, please.
Yeah, just about time for one further question, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Jevons.
Okay, Councillor Jevons, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, both. Yes, I can confirm that Inspector Corley does meet with us on a monthly basis from Newport East. And I was glad to hear that he's updated you regarding the joyriders on the Southern Distributor Road on a Sunday night. But that doesn't take me away from elevating that again. It is a scourge on that society and keeping residents to wait till early hours of the morning, especially around the traffic light junction with Lycett's Institute, which they tend to use as a stop and start line there. And I did ask Inspector Corley about the possible use of the Ghost Safe van outside of lit hours. I mean, it's something that perhaps could be. There's plenty of lay-bys along that Southern Distributor Road they could get in, but it's just an ongoing issue that I feel I needed to elevate at this particular meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jevons.
Thanks, Councillor Jevons. I know we push for time. I know that we've seemed to have stopped the issue at Tesco's on a Sunday night. We may have displaced it. We'll keep an eye on the area on the license. And I think your suggestion of the Ghost Safe ban is a reasonable one, and we can pursue that, Tom.
Absolutely. No, yeah, thank you. We'll task that and get some work. We have tasked our road policing officers to pay increased attention to it on Sunday evenings, obviously depending upon what's happened elsewhere across the force, but we'll refresh that and we'll look at the Go Safe. It's a really good suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, please.
Yeah.
Is it fair to members who have been waiting patiently to ask questions when the leader had a huge amount of time and asked multiple questions? Surely these members now who have been waiting patiently should be given an opportunity to ask their questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Mr. Price, would you like to give your view of it, please?
Well, the 30 minutes is up, Mr. Mayor. We only allocate 30 minutes for police question time. That allocation is now up. That's a debate for another time.
So could we, not today, obviously, because you said the 30 minutes is up. it's something that we need to discuss.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Otley. Councillor Otley, sorry.
You could move the abandonment of standing orders and allow this to continue. It was unprecedented that the leader of the council went first without even indication or taking any democratic way that we did. We can abandon standing orders. You could do that, Mr. Mayor, just to get through the list.
Thank you. Councillor Otley, would you like, Mr. Price, would you like to comment on Councillor Otley's comments?
No, it's not within your gift. If council wants to vote to waive standing orders and extend the time for police question time, that's a matter for council, but it's not within your personal gift, Mr. Mayor. As for it being unprecedented, it's always been the case that the leader has been invited to speak first.
So could you explain the process to me? If we wish now to extend this.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, that's not true. It's a fairly recent opportunity given to the leader of the council. It certainly didn't happen when I was leader of the council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evans. So Mr. Price, would you like to explain the process to me that would allow? I understand it's not within my personal gift, and I wouldn't even have thought it would have been. But would you like to describe the process where, if members wish, we could extend the time today for police issues? If we
somebody would simply move a motion that you suspend standing orders to extend time for police question time, and if that's seconded, it can then be debated, and then you vote on it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Would somebody like to propose that then, please? Do we have anyone proposing it?
I'll propose that, Mr. Mayor. Ray Mogford, Councillor Mogford.
Councillor Mogford's proposed it. Have we got a seconder for that, please? So the intention is to extend standing orders for suspend standing orders in order to enable police questions to be completed.
I will second, Mr. Mayor.
So Councillor Otley has seconded it. So
on another point of order, please. It's unreasonable that we ask these two officers to remain while we debate an internal matter for the council. If in due course we decide that a longer period,
that's not a point of order, Mr. Mayor.
If in due course,
Councillor Otley, could you just let Councillor Hourahan finish, please?
If in due course the council were to decide that we wanted longer to talk to the police, this would then be a matter for these officers or their representatives. At the moment, we have asked these officers to attend for half an hour. I'm sure they have very many other pressing issues they need to do, and I'm sure it is totally unreasonable to ask them to remain while we harangue over these points of order. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor Otley, sorry to have interrupted you there. Would you like to?
Can I quickly have my penny's worth, please?
Hold on a minute, please, Councillor Otley. I think Councillor Otley had a little more to say. Councillor Otley?
I was just asking what was Councillor Hourahan's point of order. It wasn't, it was a speech. He didn't make a point.
I have had a so Councillor Whitehead next now, please.
I think we've come into this meeting tonight under the standing order, which is what it is, 30 minutes. Bit unfortunate. I do tend to agree that it did go on. Robbing's probably a poor word, but taking the time, and so the questions for us will be hanging virtually in the air. I think, as somebody else has alluded to, these officers got far more important things to do at the moment. Argue and listening to us argue, it's getting a bit sound like Anforth again, unfortunately. I think that we could set a precedent for the next time, maybe, but tonight, debating this tonight is just diverting from our full council meeting, to be honest with you. It's distracting.
I just think we have a couple of questions to ask. First of all, I'm going to put the police on the spot now that if we...
Mr. Mayor.
So could you hold, just hold on. I'm just going to ask the question first. First of all, we've had a suggestion initially from Councillor Mayor, and he's popped up another message now, that we move straight to a vote, which would mean that the debate, there wouldn't be a debate. So then that's that first point. And I agree with what Councillor Hourahan has said, is that you know, we don't want this to drag on arguing amongst ourselves whether it's suitable or unsuitable. So we could get around that one by moving straight to a vote, because I would imagine members have made up their minds whether they think that they would wish for extra time to ask questions. And then if we take that approach, which means that won't take very long, we could then either before that vote or after the vote ask the police would they be prepared to remain for a little longer while members ask their questions. So those, I think, are probably, we either just close police questions and move on to the next item, or we've already had a proposal and a seconder that we extend it. So then that question will arise, is what would be the best way for members to so the other question then is, should members communicate with the police after the meeting by email, etc. So sorry, Councillor Father, to interrupt. What would you like to say now, please?
Mr. Mayor, it's pointless extending this session now. We are supposed to be in a city of democracy. What the leader of the council did wasn't very democratic. It's blocked other members from asking their questions. I think she should learn a lesson from this, and let's move on.
We can write emails.
Well, I suppose the next question then we have to ask is, are those questions, are the members who are still waiting to ask a question, are they prepared to email the police with their questions?
Mr. Mayor, before you have a debate on this, can I suggest that you either take a view now that you either put that vote to the meeting that you extend the time, or we just agreed to leave this until next time? At the moment, this is just prolonging the debate.
Yes, I don't mind that question, asking that question, Councillor Price, Mr. Price, but I'm just trying to establish what members would feel would be the best way forward. So I'm prepared to move to a vote, or I'm prepared to continue finish with police questions and move on to the next item. But I have to be guided by members on this, because it isn't in my gift to make decisions on behalf of other members.
But it is within your power to decide whether to put that motion to the vote, Mr. Mayor. That's what I'm saying.
From my side, Mr. Mayor, I'm quite happy now to withdraw the seconding of the motion, and I'm sure my colleague will come in shortly and speak. Our position has been clearly made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If the motion's been withdrawn, Mr. Mayor, then you can move on to the next item of business.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Price. So I now propose we move on to the next item, and we will have to just try to make sure that we perhaps have a slightly different arrangement at the next council meeting. Thank you. So I believe next now, sorry, Councillor Harvey, you've got your camera on.
Yeah, I just want to apologise to both the inspector and the chief inspector, because that was toe curling. Really, it's a live event. We have always, in the 10 years I've been here, we have always, if we run out of time, we email Mike.
Yes, I do understand. I do understand that, Councillor Harvey. But remember, we are a council which is run as a democracy, and members are perfectly entitled to put forward a view which may be at odds with the way the meeting is run. So anyway, I think we've decided now that we're no longer going to move on for any further police questions. Further questions of the police. I invite members to email the police with those issues they felt needed raising, and I think we will have to just think about what conclusions we're going to draw, so that in future we don't end up in the same position. Okay.
If we may be excused, I'm very happy for Mike or I to take phone calls this evening, tomorrow morning, or emails. However people wish to raise them with us, we always appreciate the contact. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor White, you popped up and then you've gone again.
No, sorry, Mr. Mayor. I kind of agree. It's just elongated the meeting and the time that the guys are in presence. I mean, anybody is at liberty to email. We haven't got to save it up for the full council meeting. If you've got any issues with the police, Mike Richards has been superb for me, and I can phone or text, email him anytime. So it was just my question tonight was based around the funding. That's all. So it's no biggie. But we are free, and Mike has always been good for me, and that's the way I'll carry on, to be honest with you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whitehead. I think that's the final observation on this meeting. Otherwise, we'll move into we'll end up debating it, and it won't be called a debate. Right. Thank you. So item 5 now is a notice of motion from the leader about the climate change emergency. Leader, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, as colleagues will be aware, at our last council meeting, we put a motion forward seeking agreement to sign up to the Edinburgh Declaration on Biodiversity. Since then, Mr. Mayor, the UK, Glasgow, has hosted COP26, and as a local authority, we've put out our climate change strategy to our residents for consultation. This week is Wales Environment Week. And it seems to me, Mr. Mayor, that there's no better time in relation to this particular issue for this City Council to declare an ecological and climate emergency. And so I would like to present the following motion to colleagues. Newport City Council resolves to declare an ecological and climate emergency. Newport City Council will continue the good work that we have started and reduce our carbon emissions to net zero carbon by 2030. We will review the services we provide to ensure they support the city's journey to both net zero carbon and adapting to the impacts of climate change by 2050. Develop a clear climate change organisational plan in consultation with our citizens for the next 5 years that will set out the actions that we need to take in relation to this. Develop a citywide local area energy plan in collaboration with experts from the public, private and third sector to develop innovative solutions to decarbonise heat, electricity and local transport and realise local renewable energy production. To work with One Newport partners and the public to develop a citywide climate strategy to enable citywide net zero carbon and adaptation to climate change by 2050 and integrate best ecological practice into each area of the Council's activity, allowing us to lead the city by example. We will publicise this declaration of an ecological and climate emergency to residents and businesses in Newport and support and influence action by partners through partnerships and support and enable action by citizens to reduce their own carbon emissions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Do you reserve the right to speak later in the debate, Leader?
I do, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I understand now this is to be seconded by Councillor Jason Hughes.
It is, Mayor, if I can reserve my right to speak at the end as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So does any member now wish to propose an amendment? No. No. So are there any? I don't think there are any amendments. So are there any comments on the motion, please? With each speech no longer than 3 minutes. Councillor Whitehead.
Councillor Jevons is the first to indicate in the box, Mr.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Whitehead. We get Councillor Whitehead second, Mr. Price.
He's fifth on the list, unfortunately, Mr. Mayor.
There's others in there. I've just seen the list. Sorry.
Sorry. Yes, I'm not. I don't see the list. Well, I think now I do, but I didn't before.
Same.
Sorry, Councillor Jevons next, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Council has made great progress over the last 4 years, reducing our carbon emissions by nearly 30%. Excuse me. This includes replacing all street lighting with low energy LED bulbs and introducing several solar PV systems across our estate. We will shortly be putting our ambitious climate change strategy out for consultation with a commitment to net zero by 2030 or sooner. Just some fleet facts, Mr. Mayor. The Council currently has a fleet of just over 200 vehicles, which are working rapidly to remove all diesel and petrol vehicles. By the end of the year, we will have a 25% of our fleet electric, which will include all cars and small vans. We are also working on more challenging bespoke plant and vehicles and recently rolled out the first electric refuse collection vehicle in Wales, with a further 5 joining the fleet over the coming months. By 2030, we will have a 100% electric fleet. The replacement of our cars and vans will save 75 tonnes of CO2 per year. This is equivalent to the amount that 100 trees would absorb over 75 years. Each electric refuse collection vehicle saves 40 tonnes of CO2 a year, and we target these electric vehicles' usage in the AQM areas. We have 21 charging stations at council buildings and 50 installed across our car parks for public use, and rollout of rapid chargers and residential charging is underway. We have worked to support Newport Bus, who have rolled out the largest fleet of electric buses in Wales. As part of Cardiff City Region, we are operating a try before you buy electric taxi offer and have installed taxi charging facilities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jevons. Mr. Price, next person.
Sorry, Councillor Lacey, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Laura Lacey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So once again, I'm speaking up as the biodiversity champion for the city in full support of this motion today. We're in an ecological and climate crisis, but it isn't too late for us as elected members to put policy in place and have a positive impact on the city for now and future generations to come. Many of you may think, but what difference will this make? It's bigger than one council or one city alone. But I would like to remind members that only a few years ago, a motion was brought to council to make Newport a bee-friendly city, and what an impact that motion has already had. We have one, but two endangered and rare bees in the city, thriving. The shrill Cardiff bee can be found not only on the Gwent levels, but also in St Julian's, along with the silver-sided nomad bee. In addition, local beekeepers have noticed an increase in honey production this year, thanks to the No Mow May initiative, as well as the creation of the wildflower meadows. Friends and colleagues, the decision made in this chamber so many months ago was instrumental in starting the process, which became policy with tangible benefits for now and years to come. I'd like to plead that you support this motion today and once again make a start for future generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lacey. Mr. Price, who's the next person?
Councillor Forsey.
Councillor Forsey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very pleased to welcome the Newport City Council Climate Change Plan. It's a practical plan for the council operations to reach net zero by 2030 and for the city's journey towards net zero. We must all play our part in resisting climate change, and this means modifying our behaviour to prevent harm being done to others. As active travel champion, I'm keen to encourage walking and cycling whenever possible. We all use our cars to go here and there, but with a bit of planning and allowing a little more time for journeys, we could walk or cycle, but it requires a change in mindset. 40% of journeys are less than 2 miles, 25% of journeys are less than 1 mile. Walking and cycling is good for our mental health, it's good for our physical health, and it's good for the environment. So I'd like to encourage more people to do it more often. The council is developing and improving more active travel routes, and I encourage everyone to use and enjoy them more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsey. Mr. Price, the next contributor.
Councillor Davis.
Councillor Davis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the previous Cabinet Member for Sustainable Development, I have absolute interest in this motion being passed. It's something I am extremely passionate about. I believe there's a moral imperative to move at a pace and to protect the future of our planet. Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent. It is disrupting national economies and affecting lives, costing people, communities and countries dearly today and even more tomorrow. People are experiencing the significant impacts of climate change, which include weather patterns, rising sea levels and more extreme weather events. The greenhouse gas emissions from human activities are driving climate change and continue to rise. They are now at the highest levels in history, and without action, the world's average surface temperature is projected to rise over the 21st century and is likely to surpass 3 degrees Celsius this century. And those areas in the world that will be most greatly affected are those areas where our most poorest and most vulnerable live. And we are seeing this internationally in areas such as Madagascar, where the drought there has been entirely caused by man-made rising CO2 levels, and we need to do something to change this. We're seeing this locally as well, where our most impoverished actually living in areas where they are directly affected by CO2 emissions, or they're living in houses that are inadequate and will not be able to cope with the anticipated climate extremes. We all have a personal responsibility and duty to take action. Our Newport City Council has already gone some way to help facilitate this with curbside recycling and the provision of electric charging points to cars. But by taking a corporate responsibility and developing a citywide strategy which will enable us as a city to become carbon neutral by 2050, I have to commend this, and I have to support this motion. This is about our children, this is about our future, and we have a collective responsibility to reduce carbon emissions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Mr. Price, the next person contributor, please.
Councillor Whitehead.
Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I could talk for hours on this. It's a massive debate. And yeah, no doubt there's a lot of people, ourselves included, making great efforts around it. But just to tag on to that, I think pollution, human pollution itself, plastics and whatnot, seems to be taking a bit of a back seat. I had my booster jab the other day in Newport Centre. I parked my car quite deliberately in the Shaftesbury area of the city, walked up past the castle, Sainsbury's and whatnot to the Newport Centre. The amount of weeds that are hiding plastics, now I did this with my Pride and Betis hat on, was staggering. Internally, the state in Newport, and it's groups like ours that are making the dent on that, on the pollution side of things. I think we also need to drag this local pollution thing along with our attitude towards climate change, because the city centre, when you approach from the M4 way towards where the One Dragon is, used to be 2, it really is. If I was a visitor, I might go around that roundabout and go back to where I come from. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Mr. Price, the next contributor, please.
Councillor Matthew Evans.
Councillor Matthew Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Conservative Group will of course support this motion and welcome the opportunity to collaborate with experts from the public, private and third sector. Providing innovative, cost-effective solutions will assist us in meeting our aims and targets, but we need to get the public buy-in. If we had a fully integrated transport network running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, for instance, with a reasonably priced and reliable bus service, then naturally we'd see a modal shift. But we are a hell of a long way away from achieving this if my complaints inbox from the new Flexi bus service is anything to go by. We also need to recognise that for some people, a car is a necessity, not a luxury, and the only realistic way to travel for people like our home carers, who do a brilliant job with home-to-home visits. In order to encourage families on low incomes to participate, we must also ensure renewable energy schemes are affordable, and I have no doubt significant funding will have to be provided by the government to achieve this. So in summary, it's not going to be easy. We must all set an example, and I guess above all, hope the rest of the world plays its part as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Just to say then, we could hear you very clearly, but your camera wasn't on.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sure that we haven't forgot what you look like, Matthew. So, but
there we are.
And that's perhaps a thing for other members who are going to speak to remember that they need to use both their camera and their microphone, please. Right, Mr. Price, where are we next?
Nobody else is indicated in the chat box, Mr. Mayor, so I assume that's back to Councillor Hughes and Councillor Mudd now.
Right. So a summing up, or right to reply to the leader first, and then Councillor Hughes, or the other way round?
Councillor Hughes first, and the leader, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So most of us here this evening, as we've just heard, are aware and very much aware of the enormous harm that a 2, let alone a 3 degrees centigrade average rise in global temperature is likely to cause, even compared to 1.5% rise. We are a coastal nation, and Newport is a maritime city, which has in the past favoured the city, but this now raises serious challenges for the future. No corner of the world will avoid the consequences of climate change. Limiting global warming will now take ambitious action on a national, local and individual level. Newport has committed to net zero targets and is leading the way in several areas. We have made a good start, however, much more urgent action needs to be taken to avoid the worst impact of climate change. Declaring a climate and ecological emergency will further commit the Council to take an effective action, and as a Council we will ensure our climate change strategy is consistent, resourced, coordinated, measurable, and in all our Council functions as we push towards net zero by 2030 as a Council. Our colleagues in Council have spoken about how Council motions have led to real change, and throughout the city and beyond we are making a real significant difference. I would urge members to share and respond to the consultation on Newport City draft climate change strategy and help shape the city's future response. We have so many activities throughout the city that we can be seriously, genuinely proud of, and we are as a city seeing urban biodiversity thrive, new species returning and wonderful partnerships throughout the city. communities which are making a real difference. But the challenges ahead for humanity, let alone the city, present the greatest of challenges, and this motion commits us as a city to doing all we can to meet those challenges. This motion sends the message that we will do, and we do take the issue seriously, and we will remain proactive in meeting our obligations as a future to our future generations. I am pleased to second this motion, one I am proud of as a council, and colleagues, I would ask you to support it and do all that it entails in moving forward as a council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Leader now, please, to sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I've listened intently to the debate this evening. One thing is very apparent, that we share, there is a consensus here, a cross-party consensus in relation to the fact that we need to respond to this particular situation. What I'd really like to highlight in relation to this and in relation to some of the comments that have been made this evening is the emphasis on the role that partnership working can play within this. So, for example, through our One Newport Public Service Board, we've signed up to the Placemaking Charter. We were the first public service board in Wales to do that. Collectively, with our public sector partners, we've signed up to a Sustainable Travel Charter. Through the Cardiff Capital Region, and the Regional Transport Authority, we're developing all kinds of innovative solutions, including an opportunity for taxi drivers to have an opportunity to use electric vehicles. So there is a scheme available to them to test drive electric vehicles and find out what the experience is of that. On a larger scale, across the whole of the M4 corridor, through the Western Gateway, we've got exploratory discussions going on around how we work together to harness the natural resource that we have and that we share in the River Severn. They're all things that we can do in partnership. We've heard members this evening highlight particular issues, and the council is addressing some of these issues. Councillor Whitehead made reference to weeds and litter. We've got a team going around the city, cleaning intensively and trying to address those those issues in relation to weeds. There is a team doing that, and they're working across the city. These are all really important things that we can do. But the most important thing, Mr. Mayor, and I don't know if you can see this, if colleagues can see this little origami boat. I want to share this with you because this is something that I made with the children of Malpas Church School when we went to church, and we were joined by the Bishop and other colleagues. And the reason that we went there and we were doing this is because the children, year 2 from Malpas Church, wanted to send a message to the politicians at COP26 that this was very much about their future. And Mr. Mayor, I thank all our colleagues this evening for contributing to the debate. I thank colleagues for working with us to develop a consensus on this issue. But actually, it's not about our future. It's about the future of year 2 and all the other children across the city. We've got a moral and ethical obligation to do this for them. And I thank colleagues for their support with this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not sure quite yet that a new career as boat builder beckons just yet, but I'm sure members will have taken on board quite literally the work that you've done, and there will be members present who are very pleased that it's a blue boat. Thank you. So if there aren't any further observations on this, I think now we could move to the vote. I think we've got a broad support for this. Now, as we know, the voting box is malfunctioning, so I'd like to ask members.
The vote has just been sent through, Mr. Mayor. The box is available now if members want to use that.
Well, I will. Yes, it hasn't appeared in as if by magic on my screen, Mr. Price.
Well, if members scroll down to the bottom of the chat box, it's there, Mr. Mayor.
I haven't even got the chat box, Mr. Price. Show conversation. Is that what would indicate that would pop up?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
There we are. Goodness gracious me. Right, so I now invite members to vote if you haven't already voted. Okay. Thank you. I think we can say that that is carried. Thank you all for your attention with this, and now we will move on to the next item, if that's okay. So the next item is item 6, which is a city centre public spaces protection order. The acronym is Pspo. So I understand the Cabinet Member for Licensing and Regulation will present this report. Councillor Truman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this report recommends that the Council resolves to approve and adopt a revised Public Spaces Protection Order, a PSPO, for the City Centre for a further period of 3 years, as set out in Appendix A. A Public Space Protection Order, PSPO, is designed to prevent individuals or groups committing persistent antisocial behaviour in a public space where the behaviour is having or is likely to have a detrimental effect on the quality of life of those in the locality. Only the council can make a PSPO, but both the police and council officers can undertake enforcement activities. Anyone who breaches the PSPO can be issued with a fixed penalty notice or is liable to a fine in the Magistrates' Court. The first city centre PSPO for Newport was made in November 2015, following extensive public consultation and oversight by scrutiny. The original PSPO was then replaced by a revised order in 2018. The PSPO has to be reviewed every 3 years to consider whether there is a continuing need for the control measures. In accordance with the legislation and the statutory guidance, the Council is required to consult with the police and the wider community. The results of the engagement with key stakeholders and public responses to the wider consultation are contained within this report. The current PCSPO restrictions are mainly enforced by Gwent Police, and police colleagues have been involved in the review process and attended both scrutiny management committee meetings. The police are supportive of the continuation of the PSPO restrictions, and they're confident that these control measures will assist them to regulate the city centre more effectively. The Scrutiny Management Committee have considered the police comments and the consultation responses and are satisfied that there is a continuing need for a city centre PSPO. They are recommending that it be reviewed on the same terms as previously, but with the inclusion of one additional control measure relating to the dangerous use of e-bikes and e-scooters. However, the final decision regarding the adoption of any PSPO is a matter for full council. When considering the need for and the impact of any PSPO, the council has to have regard to public sector equality duty and its socio-economic duty, and therefore a fairness equality impact assessment has been carried out, which is also attached to this report. The proposed control measures are considered to be reasonable and proportionate means of preventing or reducing the detrimental impact of this type of antisocial behaviour within the city centre. Mr. Mayor, I move that the council resolves to approve and adopt the city centre PSPO as set out in the report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Truman. Do we have a seconder for this, please?
I'll second it, Mr. Mayor.
That's the leader, seconded that. Thank you very much, leader. So now, are there any comments on the proposal from members?
So Councillor Lacey is the first to indicate, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I think that box has actually appeared now. Yeah, Councillor Lacey first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As chair of the Scrutiny Committee who reviewed the renewed PSPO, I would first like to thank the officers, external agencies and the committee members for the time that was spent making sure that this order presented to you today is evidence-based, demonstrating to be necessary and proportionate for what is needed within the city centre. On coming to the conclusion to recommend the PSPO as presented to the committee, we took advice from the officers, head of law and standards, as well as Gwent Police. All parties were strongly recommending the order that is presented to you all today. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I would happily support the approval of this order tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lacey. Mr. Price, I can't see the second person there.
That's Councillor Matthew Evans.
Councillor Matthew Evans now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you see me now?
See you and hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting this, albeit reluctantly, and my group have a free vote, so can do as they wish. But I remain disappointed that we haven't taken this opportunity to have a complete ban on begging in the city centre. The police were supportive, and indeed almost 80% of the public who responded were as well. Before somebody says this would be an attack on the right to beg, I think it's worth noting that residents should also have the right to visit without being asked for money. The definition of aggressive begging is difficult to interpret. Somebody might stand by a ticket machine in a car park and politely ask for cash. And some are worried of the potential consequences of saying no and will hand over money and or not return. The other question is, does it really help those with mental health issues and substance abuse problems? And I think the answer is no. By giving them money, you might as well buy them a bottle of vodka or give them drugs directly. They need help and support, and we are lucky to have numerous organisations here to assist them, to feed them, to home them, and to look after them. And this might just give them the push they need to ask for help. We should also be extremely concerned that over 80% of respondents had experienced antisocial behaviour, either frequently or occasionally, over the last 12 months. This is totally unacceptable and needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. The next person on my list is Councillor Holly Townsend.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Holly.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. While we welcome the action on bikes, this measure will penalise people experiencing homelessness and the vulnerable, as we've said before. For this reason, we can't support the motion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Townsend. Now we've got Councillor Ferris. Please. Councillor Ferris, are you with us?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Recently, I was lucky enough to go on a cruise, only to Liverpool, oddly enough, but not farther afield than that, and met a couple who lived in Crickhowell, and they told me how much they used to enjoy coming to Newport, but they don't come anymore because they don't feel safe, due in some measure to this aggressive begging. Speaking of begging, I've been known to beg myself for fundraising purposes, as probably many of you know. And I had a time in the town centre where I was shaking a tin for Christian Aid. It was Christian Aid Week. Now I pitched up outside Barclays Bank, and I was rounded on by other street beggars in the area who told me in no uncertain terms that I should shove off from their pitch. So I think you're seeing something of a gang situation here. So I too am disappointed that we're not really dealing with the issue of aggressive begging. As regards cycles, it's a mystery to me where we'll be considering next year to reduce the speed that a motor car can be driven on the road down to 20 miles an hour. Yet it's quite acceptable, or it's quite legal for these electric scooters to be driven at 30 miles an hour along the pavement. That bewilders me as well. But that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ferris, for those observations. I don't think there's a bit in this Psbo for the banning of Councillor Ferris, whether begging or aggressive. Thank you. So the next one, oh yes, I've only got four. Councillor Ferris was the last one. Mr. Price, are there any others?
No one else on the list, Mr. Mayor. But the leader seconded the motion, so she has the right to speak.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Your turn now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and again, thanks to colleagues for contributing to the discussion on this particular item. Once again, I've listened intently to the contributions that have been made, and I'd just like to go back to the point that the chair of the Scrutiny Committee has made, in that this is an evidence-based proposal. This is not based on people's perceptions or on what we might think is happening. This is about a data gathering, evidence gathering exercise, which has helped Scrutiny inform their debate, inform their discussions, and put these proposals forward to us. And it's really important as elected members that we take that into account. Now, we've heard conflicting views here this evening, Mr. Mayor. We've heard colleagues say that they don't want to support the proposal because they don't feel that it goes far enough. And we've heard colleagues say that they can't support the proposal because they feel that it's not appropriate to implement these measures. And this really highlights, doesn't it, the dichotomy that we face, the tension here in relation to this particular issue. However, I'm confident that this is a balanced and proportionate response in relation to the issues that we face. And in relation to that, I would like to make it absolutely clear that there are ongoing operations to deal with this. And what this does is it actually helps and supports the police to do this. The period that we've been through with the pandemic and lockdown has been transformational in terms of how we've been able to offer interventions to some of our individuals across the city who may have chaotic lives and need support. It's been transformational, Mr. Mayor, in what we've been able to do. So we face a very different situation to the situation we faced when we last considered this public space protection order. Within that context, it's my view, and I hope the colleagues will share this view, that what we are proposing, as I said, is reasonable, balanced and proportionate, and I hope the colleagues will support it this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So no more comments now. So Mr. Price, could we have the voting box?
Councillor Truman has a right of reply if he wants to, Mr. Mayor.
Very sorry. Councillor Truman, do you wish to say more?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think everything has been said, actually. I think we should move to the vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Truman. Right, so now we've got the box in front of us. There will obviously be some difference of opinion there, so I do encourage all members to vote. Okay, thank you. Okay, I think, Mr. Price, we can, excuse me, we can say that the motion is carried.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, colleagues. So we'll now move on to item 7, which is the Strategic Equality Plan. So, Leader, you're presenting this as well. You're very busy today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Such is the role of leader.
I know.
Under the Equality Act 2010, the Council is required to report annually on the progress that it's made against the strategic equality objectives contained within its Strategic Equality Plan. The Equality Act also requires local authorities to publish staff equalities data, which this report also contains. This annual report relates to the first year of delivery against the Council's new strategic equality objectives, published on March the 31st, 2020. The new objectives were developed in partnership with key internal and external stakeholders and were subject to extensive community engagement. The involvement of grassroots communities ensures that whilst our plan delivers a strategic vision for equality in Newport, it also ensures tangible outcomes for communities on the ground. The pandemic has presented significant challenges in delivering against some areas of work, for example, in relation to customer services. However, other areas have gained traction as a direct result of the impact of COVID-19. Our equality work this year has had to be flexible, responding to emerging challenges, particularly around access to information, education, and addressing race-based hate crime. The impacts of the UK leaving the EU have also been deeply felt by our EU migrant communities this year, and our focus on supporting people to remain in Newport and protect their rights and entitlements has continued. We've also taken stock of the effectiveness of our monitoring arrangements throughout the year and taken steps to improve them. This year, the Council's continued to demonstrate its commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion in various ways. We've signed up to Race Council Cymru's Zero Tolerance to Racism policy for Wales and Victim Support's Hate Crime Charter. We've also marked significant dates, including Pride Month, Black History 365, Refugee Week, Holocaust Memorial Day and Hate Crime Awareness Week. Earlier this year, £100,000 of funding was distributed to grassroots community projects as part of a participatory budgeting programme, and an accessibility stakeholder group has been established to advise on council projects with a focus on access for disabled people. We've also established a number of staff networks to better support our colleagues from minority backgrounds. The council now has a diversity, LGBTQ+ and disability staff network, so that's 3 networks. Analysis of the data for our workforce has highlighted key areas for improvement, including improving the levels of recorded equality data, better aligning recording categories with census data, and understanding why our levels of leavers are higher for particular groups. For example, people from an ethnic minority background and disabled people. And Mr. Mayor, I was on a meeting this morning with the European the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, where they were saying exactly that. They were making reference to the way local authorities actually record data. So it's very pleasing to note the commitment that we make here to continuous improvement in relation to that. The council, of course, still has work to do to improve representation of minority and ethnic staff at all levels of the organisation, and this will be a focus of our work during 2021-22. We've established specific recruitment and representative workforce working groups to progress this. This annual report has been to Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee and to Cabinet. This version includes a sample of the graphics that will be used in the final published report on communications. I think at this stage, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to conclude my comments, because I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, that the Cabinet member may wish to second the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So have we got a seconder for this? Oh, Councillor Mayor, please. Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to second this motion, please, and speak now, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mayor. Yeah, of course you can.
Could I say that how fortunate we are to have a leader who drives the equalities agenda, not only in Newport, but in Wales as the equality leader for the Welsh Local Government Association. I was lucky to be with her today at 2 different sessions for All Wales Equality, and it was clear from the comments that were made that how much she is admired outside of Newport as well. This has been the scrutiny, of course. This is not just a statutory duty or a box-ticking exercise. It belongs to everybody. This is an organic document. COVID, for example, did not force us to engage with communities. We use existing tools to reach even further into our vulnerable communities, because we have developed such good relationships via this mechanism. This, as I said, this is an organic and a dynamic document, and is continually updated by our excellent team and informed by our vigorous staff networks, which we've set up, and regular meetings of the Strategic Equalities Group as well. So can I thank you? The other thing I'd like to say is this report is just beautifully written and beautifully designed. It's not your usual, as I said, tick boxes and loads of boring stuff. It is easy to read. It's nice to look at, right? And it can be read by, and should be read by, everybody. And I move that we approve this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor. Would it be, Mr. Price, is it appropriate if that Councillor Mayor could speak at the end of this if he wished to, if he had other things he wished to say, or as he had his...
Nobody else has indicated, Mr. Mayor. There are no other
indicated. There we are, Councillor Mayor. You must have summed up everything now in that little speech that you made. Thank you. But thank you very much for that. I know that all members will support the work of to make as far as is possible, everybody equal in our city. Thank you. So now we will move to the vote. Now then, please, the voting box up, please. Oh, there we go. It's appeared for me, I think. Members now vote, please. Okay. Has everybody finished? Slowly clocking up the number of votes. Thank you. I think we can say that that's been carried. Mr. Price, would you say that?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move on to the annual report for the Democratic Services Committee. Councillor Ferris, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to present the 2020-2021 Democratic Services Committee Annual Report to Council. The Local Government Wales Measure 2011 requires the committee to report annually to the Council on the work that it has carried out in the past 12 months and its future work programme. This annual report covers the period from November 2020 to November 2021. The committee is a politically balanced group which works together in a non-partisan manner to consider various aspects of the Constitution and other matters that impact on the governance of the Council. The report highlights the important work carried out by the committee last year. We met on 4 occasions during the past 12 months and have continued to meet remotely in accordance with agreed Council protocols. It is anticipated that additional meetings will need to be arranged during the remainder of this year in order to complete our forward work programme in readiness for the May 2022 local elections. Most of the work of the committee has been in relation to the reviews of the Council's governance and constitutional arrangements to meet the requirements of the legislative changes in the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. In particular, we have considered the technology and protocols required for the hybrid meetings, remote access and live broadcasting of council meetings and the IT support required by elected members as part of the new working model. We have also overseen the development of a draft public participation and engagement strategy, which we intend to publish for consultation early in the new year. We have recommended to Council changes to names, terms and of reference and membership of the new Governance and Audit Committee, and recruitment is already underway for the new independent members of the committee. We considered the IRP draft annual report and noted the proposals for a significant reset for all members, allowances as from May 2022 in the light of significant changes since the previous allowances were fixed. The committee has contributed towards the development of the National Competency Framework and Induction Training Programme for new councillors and a Democracy Handbook. All of this work will be needed to be completed in the next 6 months, together with a reworking of the Council's Constitution and the product of a summary document. Therefore, it will be an extremely busy and important period for the committee. We were satisfied that adequate resources continues to be made available to fulfil the roles and responsibilities under the measure and the new legislation. We were pleased to note that following successful appointments to the Democratic Service Manager position and Scrutiny Advisor posts, the governance team is now up to a full complement of staff. Mr. Mayor, I move acceptance of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Ferris. Is there a seconder for this, please? Anybody?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. You're very busy today. So are there any comments on this proposal, please, on this report? No, Mr. Price, can you see anybody wishes to speak?
No one has indicated, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move straight to a vote. Can we have the voting box up, please? Okay, No, I still haven't got it, Mr. Price. Have other members?
No.
No.
No,
Are we?
received by me either.
No, okay.
It's come through, Mr.
Oh,
Mayor.
hang on. No,
We
it's
got-
as if. Yes, I think we've got a genius there who's just produced it for us. So perhaps members.
I'm sorry to let you know my computer is on go slow at the moment, so I do apologise.
Fine, Anne. You don't need to apologise. You know, it's you're doing fine here. Right. So we'll now ask members to vote. Now my voting box is now the bit where I put the vote has disappeared. Could we somehow? I am supporting the motion, Mr. Price. If you'd like to record that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's unanimous, the vote.
Okay, excellent. Right, thank you very much. Thank you for all your efforts with that. So now we move on to item 9, I think, aren't we? Standards Committee Annual Report. Councillor Hourihane to present, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to present the 2020-21 Standards Committee Annual Report to the Council. This 8th annual report covers the period from November 2020 until November 2021 and follows on from the last report presented to the Council last year. This annual report has previously been presented to the Council on a voluntary basis. However, as from May 2022, there will be a statutory requirement under Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021 for Standards Committee to make an annual report to Council. In addition, next year's annual report must include an assessment of the extent to which leaders of the political groups of the Council have complied with their new duties to promote and maintain high standards of contact within their groups. The committee has met on 6 occasions during the last 12 months, and the meetings have been conducted remotely in accordance with the Council's protocols. For the first time this year, Standards Committee was called upon to conduct a misconduct hearing and to impose a sanction on an elected member. This does not reflect well on the Council's reputation, and therefore we consider that this case should be a salutary lesson for all members. Therefore, we have attached a full copy of the decision to this annual report and would encourage all members to read and take note of the reason for the decision. No complaints were formally determined under stage 1 and 2 of the local resolution protocol, and no complaints were referred to the Standards Committee under stage 3 during 2020-21. The report confirms that 3 complaints were referred to the Ombudsman about city councillors during the last year, and 8 complaints were made regarding community councillors. Apart from one misconduct case that I have referred to, the other complaints were not accepted for formal investigations. Although the Ombudsman did write to 2 community councillors to remind them of their obligations under the code, to warn them about being abusive and disrespectful towards members of the public in future, and not to bring their office into disrepute. The training requirements for city councillors, community councillors and their clerks will continue to be monitored and reviewed as part of the committee's forward work programme, particularly as we move towards the next round of local government elections in May 22. During the last 12 months, 2 of our longest serving independent members, Bill Westwood, the previous chair of the committee, and Tracy Britton, completed their second terms of office, and the committee would like to take this opportunity to thank them for their hard work and dedication over the years. The committee are pleased to welcome Richard Morgan and Jill Norton as new independent members. And Mr. Mayor, I would move acceptance of the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hurahan. Have we got a seconder for this proposal, please?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Here we go. Well done, Leader. Thank you. It's not only, is it only the leaders present this evening, or is it others are being very shy with this this evening? Thank you. So have we got any comments on this proposal, please? Mr. Price, can you find anybody?
No, no one's indicated, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move straight to the vote then, and the vote at the bottom of my sheet here, Mr. Price, it says the formation of a regional partnership board report is duly approved. Is that what it is?
No, I think that's the wrong notes, Mr. Mayor.
So just to remind members,
just acceptance of the Standards Committee annual report.
Yeah, I understand that, Mr. Price, but I did just see, I saw it before and I wonder what that was about. Right, so what we're voting on, just for members, for clarity, as they say, is the Standards Committee annual report proposed by Councillor Hurahan and seconded by the leader. So will members now vote? Okay. Once again, I'm having difficulty with mine disappearing. Mr. Price, can you record my support for this report?
Yes, will do, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilcox has also indicated her her support for the motion, which we'll record.
Yeah, thank you very much. So that one's done. So now we move to item 10, which is questions to the Leader of the Council. So we now move to open questions. I'll read it out so we know what we're doing. To open questions for the Leader of the Council. So the questions will be asked in the ballot list order sent out earlier today. Before we start, does the Leader have any announcements to make? Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I do indeed have some announcements, which I'd be delighted to share with colleagues.
We'd be delighted to hear it, Leader, I'm sure.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, it's actually been 2 years almost since I was first elected as a leader by colleagues here this evening, and my goodness me, what a 2-year period it's been. Whoever would have thought 2 years ago that we would have faced some of the challenges that we faced, but we have faced them and we've worked our way through them together, and I think that's really important. Now, when I first became leader, Mr. Mayor, I made a commitment to not just to colleagues within the local authority, but also to the citizens of Newport, that I would try my hardest to be fair and to lead with integrity, respect, and above all, kindness. Because, Mr. Mayor, kindness really matters. Some colleagues may wish to reflect on that this evening. Now, one of the things that I'm really pleased to share with you is the fact that we're actually able now to start to gradually resume some of our events. And I was delighted, Mr. Mayor, that so many people joined us at the events that we've been at over recent weeks. Particularly delighted to see the number of people that were in attendance at the marathon, which was a really uplifting event, but also really important in terms of the contribution that it makes to the economy here in Newport. So great to see that up and running again. We've also had a parade for giving the freedom of the city to the Royal British Legion, and of course we've resumed our more traditional remembrance activities. Mr. Mayor, none of this would be possible without you need to turn your microphone off, David, because there's feedback. Excuse me. Cheers. So, Mr. Mayor, none of this would be possible without the dedicated team that we have here, and I'd like to offer my thanks to them for enabling these activities to go on in a very, very safe and well managed way. So thank you to all of our officers who've supported that. And on the subject of events, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to highlight that the Christmas lights will be switched on this Saturday. It'd be really good to see you there, see you be able to do that, Mr. Mayor. And again, this is another part, an aspect of us starting to move back to some sort of sense of normality, albeit managed in a very, very safe way. So just like to highlight those. Now, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to also highlight to colleagues that this year's White Ribbon Day takes place on Thursday, the 25th of November. It's an annual event that marks the United Nations International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. This year, Mr. Mayor, we're asking residents, businesses, schools and community groups to sign up to the #30 challenge. The aim of this, Mr. Mayor, is to raise awareness of the 30 children every day in Gwent that are affected by incidents of domestic abuse at home where the police are called. The #30 challenge could be something you do alone, with a few people from your household or as part of a group. People, families, schools, organisations, sports teams and community groups can set their own challenges, focusing on the number 30, and they are urged to post their actions of support online. Educational workshops and lesson plans are being rolled out in schools across Gwent to raise awareness of the importance of healthy relationships with children and young people. Domestic abuse can take many forms, including physical, coercive control, psychological abuse and financial abuse. Together with our partners, it's essential that we not only take a stand against such destructive behaviour, but that we also encourage those experiencing it to seek help, Mr. Mayor. Moving on, Mr. Mayor, and thankful for the debate we've had this evening. As colleagues are aware, climate change is one of the defining global challenges of our generation. We'll all be aware of the outcomes of COP26 recently held in Glasgow and the urgent need for us all to come together to limit global temperature rises and build a sustainable world for future generations. As a council, we've already made a good start, reducing our direct and energy generating emissions by 29% over the last 3 years. However, we know that we have much more work to do, and I'm pleased that we've presented our draft climate change plan for consultation. Our ambitious plan sets out how we'll work towards becoming
Leader, you've been muted.
Yeah, it wasn't me, honestly. The sound disappeared. No, not you. We heard most of it, but there's a bit there. I think when you started about COP26, I think from there on, perhaps.
Okay, that's not a problem, Mr. Mayor. I'll start again. Climate change is one of the defining global challenges of our generation. We'll all be aware of the outcomes of COP26 recently held in Glasgow and the urgent need for us all to come together to limit global temperature rises and build a sustainable world for future generations. As a council, we've already made a good start, reducing our direct and energy generating emissions by 29% over the last 3 years. However, we know that we have much more work to do, and I'm pleased that we've now presented our draft climate change plan for consultation. Our ambitious plan sets out how we'll work towards becoming carbon neutral by 2030 and how we'll use our services to support climate change action across the city. It's centred around 6 key delivery themes: organisational, culture and leadership, our buildings, our land, transport and mobility, the goods and services we procure, and our wider role. Now we're seeking the views of our residents, businesses and stakeholders to help ensure that we're taking the right actions before we finalise the plan in early 2022. And continuing in the same vein, I was incredibly proud to have accepted the Outstanding Organisation Award on behalf of Newport City Council at the recent inaugural Environmental Awards hosted by the National. The award recognised the commitment and passion of our staff to deliver real change for our organisation and for the citizens of Newport. My thanks go to those who work tirelessly and with passion to improve our environment and lower our carbon emissions, and to those who dedicate their spare time to supporting countless initiatives as volunteers in the city and beyond. This win was a reflection of their efforts and dedication. I'd also like to congratulate Mr. Mayor, one of our social workers, who's been recognised for her outstanding work within fostering. Lorraine Bird, a supervising social worker with our Foster Wales Newport team, has been awarded an Excellence Award for outstanding contribution by a social worker by the Fostering Network. The nomination was based on a letter of appreciation from one of the foster carers she works with, highlighting how she always goes above and beyond. Congratulations again to Lorraine and the whole fostering team who do such an amazing job for young people here in Newport. Mr. Mayor, it was recently announced that Newport has been awarded over £2.8 million from the UK Community Renewal Fund. Bids to the UK Community Renewal Fund were invited earlier in the year with an aim of supporting people into employment and investment in skills local businesses, communities and place. As a council, we were pleased to be able to support partners in their applications, and we can now push ahead with several projects that will really make a difference in our local areas. We'll continue to bid for money from such initiatives to ensure that Newport can benefit as much as possible. Finally, Mr. Mayor, planning permission was granted earlier this month, paving the way for our vision of a new leisure centre for the residents of Newport to become a reality. Work will now begin early next year to create a 21st century building that will house state-of-the-art facilities. As well as a fantastic leisure offer, we're determined that the new centre should be built to the highest possible environmental standards. We also want it to be inclusive and to be used by people of all ages from across the city. So accessibility is also a key factor in its design and location. We asked the public for their views on the development earlier this year, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. I'm sure that, like me, they'll watch the progress of the development with great interest and cannot wait for the day for the doors to open. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Your microphone is muted, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry about that. Right, so now we move to questions to the leader. The first person is Councillor Matthew Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and for your information, I'm wearing my Stand Up to Domestic Abuse badge tonight. Mr. Mayor, back in February, Councillor David Fairweather asked if you, or indeed any other cabinet member, had been in negotiations over the soon-to-be vacant Debenhams. Your response was a rather long no. Around the same time, you were quoted in the BBC Wales article saying the council would work with Friars Walk, the Welsh Government and the Newport Now bid, which works to improve the city centre, to find a solution. 8 months later, an FOI revealed that you still hadn't had any meetings with the owners of Friars Walk, the Talisker Corporation. Can you tell us why? And on a related point, we have recently been told the devastating news that Admiral is closing its offices in the city centre. So can you tell us when you knew about this and what have you done since to try and rescue these jobs? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, whilst I can influence and control the information that comes out of my mouth, I can't control the information that comes from journalists or is written in that way. So just for the purposes of clarity in relation to the question put forward by the Leader of the Opposition, there have been a number of meetings. I personally, as I've already said, met with the chair of the Debenhams Group. There's been ongoing discussions between senior officers with technical skills with Talisker. I'm afraid I don't have the accountancy skills or the legal skills to have those discussions at that level. And I'm sure you'd all agree that when those discussions are underway, that Newport City Council is best represented by the officers who have got the most appropriate skill sets in that context. Moving on to Admiral. I'm sure that colleagues were as disappointed as I was with the news that Admiral proposed to close their office here in Newport. When did we know about this? Well, we knew about this on the day that they issued the press release. We had a meeting with them at 9 o'clock in the morning and we're informed that a press release would be issued later that day. That's when we knew about it. What are we doing about it? Well, officers are continuing in dialogue with Admiral. As I'm sure colleagues are aware, Admiral remains the tenant of the building here in Newport. They do have a significant time period left on the lease, and they will still be responsible for paying any rent that is due on that building. Whilst that's a technical response, of course, officers will continue to work closely with Admiral to ensure that an appropriate tenant is identified for the building, and we are reassured by Admiral that they are working very hard to do that. How will we know that? How will they feed back to us? Regular communications are in place, and there's a fortnightly meeting in place to ensure that updates on this are progressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Evans, do you have a supplementary question for any point to that answer?
Yes, I do indeed, Mr. Mayor. I mean, there's lots of references there to officers will be doing this or that. There seems to be a very recurring theme here. It's a lack of joined up thinking and leadership. And I'd like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to my former deputy leader, the late Councillor Ed Townsend, who worked tirelessly to get Admiral into the city centre in the first place. Surely we should be on the ball and known about these things. Surely we should be organising meetings with the relevant stakeholders. And we've heard that the council has paid Talisker £375,000 this year alone, up until September, in subsidy payments to assist in covering vacant shop units, and a staggering total of almost £2 million since January 2017. Understandably, you were quick to organise a meeting with Black Lives Matters organisers during the pandemic. So why no urgency with Debenhams when we're hemorrhaging jobs and money? Surely we should be doing more, and it's up to the leader of the council to be leading these discussions and negotiations. Thank you, Mr.
Evans. Councillor Leader, do you have anything you wish to say to that?
Can you clarify the question, please?
Well, surely you should have been doing more if you know that we spent £2 million paying the Talisker Corporation over the Friars Walk development, one meeting with the chair of Debenhams. Surely you should be having irregular meetings with relevant stakeholders in the city centre and showing the leadership. You know, as I mentioned, understandably, you organised one very quickly with the Black Lives Matters organisers. These are some urgent situations we need resolving. This was we knew back in December last year. You know, and to say we've had one meeting, as leader of the council, you should be getting all these stakeholders together. Do you not agree? Particularly as the council spent £2 million with Debenhams and the Friars Walk Corporation. That's £2 million of council taxpayers' money.
May I?
Yes.
Well, when I get asked a sensible question, I think I'll give you a sensible answer. However, given the jumbled up nature of the supplementary question, I will try to unpick it and respond to the points made. But perhaps if we could ensure there's clarity in terms of questions in future. So in relation to Talisker and the relationship there, that's widely documented and is reported every single time that Cabinet meets to discuss our finances. Every time we receive a financial report, that information is in there. That's documented, it's in the public domain, and we've been over these discussions previously. So the subsidy, the funding that is available is widely publicised and everyone is aware of that. Moving on to the issues around Admiral, I'm afraid that we found out in the same way as our neighbours, where Admiral have other offices, about the measures that they're taking. I should emphasise, however, and I think this is really important, Mr. Mayor, that this does not involve job losses. This is the relocation of staff. And this is a reflection of the change in working patterns that have happened since the pandemic. We do work closely with businesses at a range of levels across the authority. We work incredibly closely with the Business Improvement District, and I'm delighted that I think it's something like 16 new businesses are choosing to open up here. We're also working very closely to support businesses to start up as well. But let me give you a reminder of some of the businesses that are choosing to come to Newport and some of the investment that's being made.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, that wasn't the question. The question was quite straightforward, as I thought I'd put it. Why haven't the leader of the council been having regular meetings with the Friars Walk developers who actually we have paid over £2 million to? Surely that is something which is vitally important. £2 million of our money. We could do a lot with £2 million. So why haven't you had regular meetings with that organisation, for instance?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Did the Leader of the Opposition mishear me when I spoke? I said very clearly that officers with technical skills have and do meet regularly with that company.
Sorry, this is not about officers. This is about leadership. This is about putting yourself forward to these people and working with other businesses to ensure that we get our money back. Ensure that places like Debenhams are actually utilised properly. You know, it's not, leave the technical details, I can understand that, but this is surely something which should be of critical importance.
Point of order, please, Mr. Mayor.
What point of order?
Well, you've asked a question and you keep asking supplementary questions on top of it. Are we allowed to do this?
It's merely clarification, Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Not sure what's happening. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Spencer. I think this line of question isn't going anywhere. So I'd like to now move on straight away to Councillor Whitehead's question, please.
Cheers, Mr. Mayor. Probably got about 9.4 seconds, beating Usain Bolt. Leader, it's quite noticeable recently, very recently actually, the amount of people, social media is awash with Newportonians frequenting Cardiff. The fabulous winter wonderland they've got there, the big wheel, the market stalls. Now bear in mind, it's not criticism before we go anywhere. I'm just mindful that we could emulate this, and we should emulate our neighbours at times. There's nothing wrong with that. For me, I'm looking at the land opposite Friars Walk, for example, the football, the traders there, the eateries. That would be this would be massive, and I think just to stop our residents leaving to go to Cardiff, you can't blame them. It's a fantastic setup they got there. Are we in a position to emulate that? I mean, I don't think it'll be cost as regards providers. They're the people that make the money, the people who own the big wheel, the market traders and whatnot. It's just us giving up that bit of land. I mean, is it feasible to have a conversation around setting up something like this on an annual basis, much like Cardiff do? They were on the news again tonight and they looked absolutely wonderful. And like I say, I just see so many people from Newport going in and I'm thinking, I'd love you to be in Newport, splashing your cash. Thank you, Leader.
Leader, would you like to answer that succinctly?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll answer it in my way. Thank you. So, Councillor Whitehead, I'm really glad that you've asked me that question, because I think that we do need to provide opportunities for people to come together at this time and to bring people into the city centre. And that's why I was really pleased to mention the switching on of the Christmas lights, because not only will there be a fun fair and there'll be rides across the city for that, there'll also be we'll also see the street markets as well throughout the city centre, and all that will help our economy, it will help our leisure, and it'll help businesses across the city. Now, we can certainly talk about any ideas that people may have for any attractions, any seasonal attractions. There's absolutely no problem in doing that at all. We can have those discussions. What I would say that we may be limited for a site in terms of locations, as we're also about to start development on our new leisure building over on that side of the riverfront. But more than happy to do that. Like everyone else, I'm really keen to keep the footfall within the city centre area, and I am confident that the measures are being undertaken, not just by the City Council, but by us working in partnership with the Business Improvement District and other stakeholders, that we'll be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. You realise I was only teasing you on that then.
a quick supplementary, just to say that it wasn't a criticism, it's just an observation. I just, it looks absolutely fantastic. I've been there myself. I've fallen all over the place in that rink in Cardiff, but it's just something that I think people are talking about, that, you know, it would just be great to keep these people in Newport in the future. It'd be nice to try and emulate that, and we could do that kind of annually.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Now, because Councillor Townsend has withdrawn her question, Councillor Fazina Hussain, you have an opportunity to ask yours now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to ask the leader, can the leader please provide us with an update on the support available to businesses?
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hussain, for your question. I'd really like to respond by highlighting the excellent work that the business support team do here in Newport. I think we talked about businesses and we've talked about the work that different people do in relation to this. And within this, it's really important to recognise the efforts of the business support team. And I don't know if anybody's had the opportunity to view this, but they have put together a short film that it's been circulated on social media, and the purpose of this really is to raise awareness of the grants that are available to businesses to support them, not just in terms of establishing businesses, but also to set up their businesses. Now, the Business Development Fund, our own Business Development Fund, has been increased to £300,000 this year. And the grants available are between £5,000 or £10,000. We're also able, and I think this is also important to note as well, to provide grants of up to around £250,000 to refurbish commercial and residential properties in the city centre through our city centre Property Enhancement Fund. So there is quite significant support available to them through that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have you any supplementary questions to that, Councillor Hussain? I'm afraid you seem to have muted somehow. That's happened. Don't know how.
Yes, I do have a supplementary question, Mr. Mayor. Has the Welsh government made any additional support available? If so, how much?
Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hussain. I'm not sure if colleagues are aware, but there was an announcement made today. So a very timely question, Councillor Hussain. Thank you for that. And the Welsh Government has announced a £45 million package of funding to help small businesses across Wales. And the aim of this is to help businesses to grow, but also to support thousands of people to train to work in sectors that are under-resourced at the moment. And I was very pleased to hear this announcement. So it's good news for our SMEs, good news for people thinking of starting up businesses, but also brilliant news for people who are thinking about changing their careers. Now, we haven't received an award letter as the announcement's only been made today, but we do anticipate somewhere in the region of £1.5 million will come to Newport from Welsh Government to support these initiatives as well. So we were very pleased to hear that announcement being made, and also to support that, Welsh Government announced an additional £10 million being made available to boost Wales's popular personal learning accounts, and it's those personal learning accounts that enable people to change careers. What's particularly relevant and helpful about that is that will be targeted at re-engaging and retraining staff to help work in the NHS, within social care, and also help to train more HGV lorry drivers. So there's real opportunities here, not just through the funding and support that's offered by Newport City Council, but also by the funding packages offered by Welsh Government to support businesses and support growth and individuals for those career changes. Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I noticed the time's up. I do apologise.
Yes, but I did want you to a chance to respond fully to Councillor Hussain. And the interest, if any it would appear then if any members lose their seats next May, there will be ample opportunities for them to retrain. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll now move on to question 10, which is the first question to the Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member of City Services, Councillor Mogford. The time limit for each question is 10 minutes. Councillor Mogford, your question to the Cabinet Member, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. With the new impetus to combat climate change in Wales, does the Cabinet Member have a plan or a vision to ensure that access to local recycling centres can be optimised in terms of distance and time taken? A practical case in point is the 5 Lanes Recycling Centre on the A48, just on the border with Monmouth. Many residents are having to take the longer journey, both in time and distance, to the NCC Recycling Centre, which can be up to a 20-mile plus round trip, rather than just a few miles in some cases. In making it easier and quicker to travel to the nearest recycling centre, does the Cabinet Member also see the potential for a reduction in fly tipping on top of the beneficial reductions in vehicle emissions?
Thank you, Councillor Mogford. The Cabinet Member to respond, please.
Oh, sorry, I didn't have my camera on.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And excuse me, I've got a bit of catarrh, so if I cough, just excuse me. Monmouthshire County Council took the decision to close access to their 5 Lanes Recycling Centre to Newport residents back in 2019. And while we regret the inconveniences caused to residents in the area, unfortunately, it is for Monmouthshire County Council to decide on the access rules to their recycling sites, over which we have no control. Newport City Council's corporate plan details plans for a second household waste recycling facility to be built in the east of the city. Also, all Newport residents receive a weekly collection of all common recyclable household waste, plus refuge and garden waste collections. A special collection is available upon request for bulky materials. Finally, we have seen no correlation between fly tipping and access to the HWRC. Fly tipping is a criminal activity, but as a vast majority of our residents would not entertain. A significant proportion of fly tipping is carried out by commercial operators who cannot use the HWRC and have a legal obligation to dispose of their waste in line with relevant legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Councillor Mogford, do you have a supplementary question, please?
You're muted, Councillor Mogford.
I think you muted, Councillor Mogford.
It's embarrassing, sorry. In the future, if Newport City Council are interested in an agreement to joint fund a facility such as 5 Lanes, we would be happy to enter into these kinds of discussions. This is from an email received on the 25th of the 9th, 2019 from Monmouthshire City Council. They seem to be putting out an offer to work with Newport City Council. Has this offer been taken up, and would it be beneficial for everybody if the two councils work together in sharing their facilities?
Thank you, Councillor. Response, please, Councillor Jevons.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I find that a little bit difficult, in just referring to the fact that they closed access to residents in 2019. We have had conversations with them in the past, but they haven't been very promising. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we'll move now on to the second question to the Deputy Leader from Councillor Kellaway, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've received a number of emails from concerned residents regarding the risk of flooding in Llanwern. And you may recall the rain over the festive season in December 2020, which resulted in residents' homes being damaged and some residents being evacuated. What reassurance can you and the administration provide to residents that they will not see a repeat of the overtopping of Monk's Ditch and subsequent flooding of Llanwern village and wider area, so all residents can at least look forward to a peaceful and stress-free Christmas? Thank you, Mr.
Councillor Kellaway. Councillor Jevons to respond, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have carried out a thorough CCTV investigation to the drainage system along Station Road and carried out numerous pipe repairs, root removal and jetting of the system to ensure an improvement in the performance of the system. We have recently received a high rainfall event which did not appear to have any flooding issues in the area, which we may have otherwise seen prior to the remedial works being completed. The issue is highly reliant on water being able to discharge from the system into the associated reens. If the reens downstream of the system remain in working order, then we are confident that the residents should not experience any issues in the future. We have also issued 2 breaches of condition notices to Redrow to ensure that the development proceeds in accordance with the approved details, particularly in relation to drainage. Redrow were required to cease the provision of further hard surfacing and soil stripping until details of surface water drainage had been agreed and implemented. This is considered necessary in order to ensure that surface water runoff from the site does not increase issues of flooding for the village. Newport City Council are seeking Welsh Government grant funding to both reline some of the existing system and upgrade other parts to ensure a better performance in the area. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Councillor Kellaway, do you have a supplementary question?
If I may, just a quick question. Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Over about two or three years ago, the council was given £186,000 to upgrade those drains from the developer. Why wasn't that money or those repairs done sooner, so the village didn't flood last year?
There was an original Hyder scheme design in 2005, and the site was not developed for many years. When the site was developed, the original design did not meet the current flood standards due to climate change and would clash with multiple utilities. An alternative, more suitable design has since been progressed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kellaway and Councillor Jevons. So the next question now is from, once again, for the Deputy Leader, from Councillor Routley. Your question to the Cabinet Member, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, will the Cabinet Member for City Services outline his political vision and leadership with regards to how he is going to build momentum going forward on road safety and environment within Newport?
Councillor Jevons.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Newport City Council is committed to the delivery of objectives set out in the Wales Transport Strategy, which makes people and climate change a priority when looking at highways and transportation. Focus on road safety. Newport is working closely with Welsh Government in the delivery of a new national default speed limit of 20 miles an hour in residential areas, which is due to come into force across Wales in 2023. The key objective is to make roads and streets safer for all users, with greater priority to public transport and active travel, as seen in recent projects around the city, including Queen's Hill and Devon Place. With regard to the environment and the meeting of both the 2030 and net zero targets of 2050, the authority, in collaboration with Welsh Government, is delivering publicly accessible electric vehicle charge points for the city and making good progress in decarbonising the council's fleet. We are also driving forward initiatives to deliver the benefits of a greener city for our communities and the encouragement of biodiversity, especially in the urban environment. We are currently out of consultation on our climate change strategy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Councillor Routley, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, thank you.
Cabinet Member, let's continue in the partnership approach with you. The Mega Road, for example, it has a 30 mile an hour, which then accelerates right up to 50 and decelerates right down to 30 miles an hour. We all know that this increased acceleration and deceleration is responsible for high levels of pollution, and the decreases actually are responsible for poor safety. And the overall effect, the combination of this, is driver frustration, and that can actually highlight and increase accidents waiting to happen. But as I say, let's help you. Let's work together. We heard earlier on about the climate change. Like the Cat's Ash Road, we were the first in Newport to bring private funding initiatives.
Is there a question there, Mr. Mayor?
No,
yes, it is, Mr. Mayor. Yes, who's speaking? Who's
interrupting? Mr. Price. Mr. Price is quite reasonable. Just hold on.
Will the Cabinet?
Could both councillors stop for a minute now and draw breath? It's a perfectly reasonable question that Mr. Price asked. Is what is Councillor Routley's supplementary question?
Yes.
So Councillor Routley will be able to give that answer. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. And so I was just clarifying who was jumping in. I didn't know what voice it was, but there we go. we will find the money to pay for the traffic audits. And if we do this, will you put your political might behind us to push this up the scale so we could get this done? It makes perfectly sense, Cabinet Member, that we have a harmonisation of traffic speeds on the mega road. Instead of the 30, 50, 30 that we have now, which goes past the crematorium at 50 miles an hour, we can help you yet again. We can find the money to pay for the traffic audits. Please help us.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I can sort of interject at this point. I think Councillor Oatley is asking Councillor Jevons if he will put his support behind the traffic audits idea. That's the supplementary question. I think that's it. Fine, Councillor Oatley. Councillor Jevons will answer that if he is able.
Mr. Mayor, I mean, I thought the issue was around Mega Road, but the review that Welsh Government have asked us to look into only considers 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour. Now, Mega Road does have two 30-mile-an-hour stretches, one at Waltwood Road and one to its proximity with Psbo Road, and these will be included in the review. The default speed on the rest of the road is 60 miles an hour, but the speed limit there is 50. The speed limit there is 50, so it has already been dropped along and deemed appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lord.
Right, thank you, Councillor Oatley. Right, so now we will move next to question.
Well, the time is up for Councillor Jevons, Mr. Mayor. So unfortunately, we'll have to publish the written answer to Councillor Forsey's question.
Yeah, unfortunate way to express it, Mr. Price, that the time is up for Councillor Jevons, but I think we understand what you mean. So we're now moving. So that is it. Now is it, Mr. Price? Where do we go next?
It's the next question for the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Development.
Mr. One I've got it in front of me. Thank you. So, Councillor Mogford, you're asking the question of the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Development. So can you ask that question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hundreds of studies have found harmful biological or health effects from exposure to radio frequency radiation at intensities too low to cause significant heating. The public at this time have no reason to believe 5G is safe. That's a quote from a respectable journal. 5G masts are starting to pop up all around Newport. Their range is very short and effectively cover line of sight. So just how many of these masts can we expect to be given planning permission if the plan is to get full or significant coverage of 5G in Newport?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Councillor Mogford. Nice to see you, and thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Most forms of telecommunications equipment development, including 5G masts, are permitted development and not devolved to Wales. So this means that the principle of the development is accepted and the local planning authority can only consider the siting and the actual appearance of the proposal. So potential health implications would not be a planning consideration. So all local planning authorities are governed by planning legislation, and Newport City Council cannot vary from this. Radiation concerns associated with 5G masts fall under separate regulations. I'm aware of the media reports and some perceived health risks, but I'm also aware of specific research which has counteracted these claims with robust evidence. So, for example, last year, the UK regulator Ofcom found no identifiable risks in its first test since 5G technology was deployed, and the World Health Organization are of a similar view. So when the prior approval application for 5G masts is submitted to the local planning authority, we ensure that the submission includes the ICN-IRP, the International Commission certificate, and this certificate is necessary part of the process. And without this, the local planning authority would refuse to consider the application. So the aim of the network is to create super fast connectivity to our citizens, to our businesses, as you know, in Newport, and encourage inward investment. However, they do not undertake any pre-consultation with us in terms of their proposal for mast sharing or the number of new masts required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I realise you will have a supplementary question, Councillor Mogford. Could you just explain to me and possibly other members what the term line of sight means?
You can see. If you can see the mast can see you. If you can't see the mast can't see you. With 4G and other lower frequency radio signals, they basically go over the horizon, travel around corners, etc.
Yeah, thank you. So could you now, if you have a supplementary, would you now please ask that?
I will. I don't think I got the exact answer to my question unless I missed it. My question was how many of these masts can we expect to be seen in Newport? My supplementary question, and I'm not sure where, and I've written this down actually for the benefit of the cabinet member, so he gets to see my supplementary in advance, and here it comes. You may have started to answer it, but I'm going to ask the supplementary again. Could the cabinet member attempt to reassure members that in rolling out 5G in and around the Newport area, that he is convinced that the risk to public health is below a threshold of concern? Has the cabinet member engaged with Welsh Senate on the matter at this time in seeking this reassurance?
Cabinet member, please.
I think, as I referred to in my answer, Councillor Mogford, the telecommunication side is not devolved to Wales, but in relation to the health risks to the public, we are confident at this time that, according to all the research that's been done, and Ofcom, it's an Ofcom issue. It's not an issue for us, but Ofcom are telling us, telling the UK in general, that the technology is safe at this point, and we have to go along with that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Cabinet Member.
Thank you,
Councillor. Thank you, Cabinet Member. Question 6 now, Councillor Marshall, I believe. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Marshall.
Mr. Mayor,
I think we've got a problem.
Yeah, I would allow me first of all just to thank you for those.
You are. Yeah, you've gone now. You're a bit blurred and the sound is a bit poor. Oh, there
Mr.
we are.
Mayor, can you hear me now? I've gone to my iPad. I'm having a bit of signal issues. Yep, excellent.
Yep. Please.
Sorry, thank you. So I was just saying, Mr. Mayor, if you would allow, just a big thank you to everyone with the St. John side of things to raise £60 for the chosen tie that I've got for tonight. I know you also told me the other day know how big I am with St. John, so thank you to everyone that's donated and bringing the Christmas theme to the council meeting this evening. My question for the cabinet member this evening is Newport City Council corporate plan makes a commitment to a reduction in the number of out-of-county social care placements. Can the cabinet member give an overview of the progress against this objective, please?
Thank you. Cabinet member? Councillor Cochrane, are you? There we are. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just, before I answer the question, I've had a call from Herbie Thomas, who couldn't get on earlier on. Then he's got an appointment with a consultant. So could you give his apologies, please? And I didn't want to interrupt the proceedings before that.
Of course you can.
Right. Can I thank Councillor Marshall for asking the question? It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility as corporate parents for our looked after children. I asked the question, is it good that we as an authority have over 350 looked after children? Some would say no. Our priority, though, is to be the well-being and safety of all our most vulnerable children. Maybe we should be proud to say yes. These children are identified as at a risk, visible, and need of all that we can give them as responsible corporate parents that an authority can give. Most of these children are within our care in foster care community, with the help and support they need, supported where possibly by family contacts. The need to attract people who are interested in joining our foster care community is essential to progress our foster care team. If you are aware of anyone who would be keen to do so, please do not hesitate to encourage them to make inquiries with our foster care team. Getting back to the original question, we reviewed the situation with regard to reducing out-of-area placement for children placed in care. Within the independent sector, the support and ethos were not in line with our expectations and costs. They were excessive. The rates at the time were between £4,000 and £8,000 per week for each placement. One local authority close by was having to find £17,000 per week for one child. This administration made the brave decision to bring as many out-of-area placements back home to Newport wherever possible. We were fortunate to secure funding from the Regional Partnership Board to support this venture. Now settled in, the children are doing extremely well, receiving appropriate care and encouragement and moving forward with their lives. I am immensely proud of what we have achieved together in Newport. The Social Services Minister acknowledged this by congratulating us in a letter as an authority, suggesting that this approach should be shared across Wales. It could be said that we as an authority are leading the way, but none of this could have been achieved without the excellent work of staff within Children's Services, and I thank them.
Thank you, Councillor Cochrane. Councillor Marshall, do you have a supplementary question?
No supplementary. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I think at this point, I'd like to say as well that the Mayor and Mayoress and myself met members of Foster Care Wales, I think, at an event we went to on Sunday evening. And whatever we can do to support you, Paul and Stephen, in these endeavours, we're perfectly prepared to help. So anything we can do, please ask us. So that concludes the business set out on the agenda. The date for the next council meeting is Tuesday, the 25th of January 2022. And I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for your attendance. And I would perhaps discussions could be had with the appropriate groups of people, so the difficulties we encountered with the police questions this evening don't occur in future, for the benefit of elected members and obviously the wider public beyond this virtual meeting. Thank you. Right, off we go. The rest of the night off. Thank
you, Mr. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.